The wind carried more than just the scent of rain that evening. It carried a whisper, a faint echo of a promise made long ago. For years, Emma had tried to forget the summer she spent with her cousin Liam in their grandmother's old house. But now, standing on the creaky porch of that same house, the memories came rushing back, unbidden and haunting. The promise they had made to each other under the stars, sealed with a pinky swear, had been buried by time and distance. Yet, as the wind rustled through the trees, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Liam's voice was calling to her, urging her to remember what they had vowed to protect. The summer sun hung lazily in the sky, casting golden rays over the sprawling fields behind their grandmother's house. Emma and Liam, barely 12 at the time, had claimed the old oak tree as their fortress. Its gnarled branches stretched wide, offering shade and secrecy, a perfect hideaway for two cousins who shared everything: dreams, fears, and the kind of bond that felt unbreakable. That summer, the world outside their little haven didn't matter. It was just the two of them, the wind, and the endless possibilities of childhood. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they sat on the porch swing, its rusty chains creaking with every gentle sway. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle, and the fireflies had just begun their nightly dance. Liam, always the quieter of the two, broke the comfortable silence. "Do you ever wonder about the stories this house could tell?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma tilted her head, considering his question. "What do you mean?" she replied, her curiosity piqued. Liam's eyes darted toward the attic window, where the faint outline of a dusty old trunk was visible through the grimy glass. "Grandma never lets anyone up there," he said, his tone tinged with a mix of intrigue and unease. "I think there's something hidden. Something important." Emma followed his gaze, her imagination already running wild. "Maybe it's treasure," she suggested, her voice bubbling with excitement. Liam shook his head, his expression serious. "No, it's not treasure. It's something else. Something dark." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment, the cheerful chirping of crickets seemed to fade into the background. Emma studied her cousin's face, noticing the faint lines of worry etched into his features. "What do you think it is?" she asked, her voice softer now. Liam hesitated, as if weighing whether to share his thoughts. Finally, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I think it's about our family. Something no one wants us to know." That night, under a blanket of stars, they made a promise. A promise to protect each other, no matter what. They sealed it with a pinky swear, their small fingers intertwining as if to solidify the vow. "No secrets," Liam said, his eyes locking onto hers. "No matter what happens, we'll always tell each other the truth." Emma nodded, her heart swelling with a sense of loyalty she couldn't quite explain. "No secrets," she echoed. "Always." But as the years passed, the promise began to fade. Life pulled them in different directions, and the bond that once felt unshakable started to fray. Emma moved away, her days filled with school, friends, and the busyness of growing up. Liam stayed behind, his letters becoming fewer and farther between. The last time she saw him, he seemed different, distant, as if the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. She had asked him if everything was okay, but he had just smiled, a sad, fleeting smile, and said, "It's nothing. Just tired." Now, standing on the porch of their grandmother's house, Emma couldn't help but feel the weight of that forgotten promise. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faintest whisper of Liam's voice. She closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her. The laughter, the secrets, the unspoken understanding they had shared. It all felt so far away, yet so achingly close. She stepped inside, the familiar scent of aged wood and lavender greeting her. The house was exactly as she remembered it, frozen in time. Her footsteps echoed softly as she made her way to the attic stairs, each creak of the wood beneath her feet a reminder of the past. The door to the attic was slightly ajar, as if someone had been there recently. Her heart pounded as she pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The attic was dimly lit, dust motes dancing in the slivers of sunlight that filtered through the cracks in the roof. The old trunk sat in the corner, just as it had all those years ago. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she approached it, her fingers trembling as she lifted the lid. Inside, she found a stack of yellowed letters, a faded photograph, and a small, leather-bound journal. The photograph was of their grandmother, young and smiling, standing beside a man Emma didn't recognize. The letters were addressed to her, in Liam's handwriting. She sank to the floor, clutching the journal to her chest. The wind outside seemed to grow louder, its whispers more urgent. Emma opened the journal, her eyes scanning the familiar scrawl. The first entry was dated just a few months before Liam's disappearance. "I can't keep this to myself anymore," it began. "The truth is too heavy, and I don't know how much longer I can carry it alone." Her heart ached as she read on, each word a dagger to her soul. The promise they had made as children had been more than just a vow. It had been a plea for help, a cry for understanding. Tears blurred her vision as she reached the final entry. "Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise. But I need you to do something for me. Find the truth. Protect our family. And remember, no secrets." The wind howled outside, its whispers now a deafening roar. Emma clutched the journal tightly, her resolve hardening. She would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. For Liam, for their promise, for the bond that had never truly been broken. The years that followed that summer were a blur of change and distance. Emma's family moved to the city, and the once constant stream of letters from Liam slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. Life moved forward, as it always does, and the memories of that summer began to fade, buried beneath the weight of new responsibilities and relationships. But every now and then, when the wind carried the scent of honeysuckle or the fireflies danced in the twilight, Emma would feel a pang of longing for the bond she had shared with her cousin. The last time she saw Liam, it was at their grandmother's funeral. He had grown taller, his boyish features sharpened into those of a young man, but his eyes held a sadness that hadn't been there before. They had exchanged polite greetings, the kind reserved for distant relatives, and Emma had felt a strange ache in her chest. She had wanted to ask him about the attic, about the promise they had made, but the words had stuck in her throat. Instead, they had stood side by side at the graveside, their silence louder than any words could have been. After the funeral, Liam had pulled her aside, his hand trembling as he handed her a small, folded piece of paper. "Keep this safe," he had said, his voice barely audible. "Don't open it unless something happens to me." Emma had stared at him, confusion and fear swirling in her chest. "What are you talking about?" she had asked, but Liam had just shaken his head, his eyes filled with a sorrow she couldn't comprehend. "Just promise me," he had whispered, and she had nodded, tucking the paper into her pocket without another word. That was the last time she saw him. Months turned into years, and the paper remained untouched, a silent reminder of a promise she didn't fully understand. Then, one rainy afternoon, the call came. Liam was gone, disappeared without a trace. The news hit Emma like a punch to the gut, and she found herself standing on the porch of their grandmother's house once again, the weight of his absence pressing down on her. The house felt different now, colder, as if it too mourned the loss of its last inhabitant. Emma stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. She made her way to the attic, her heart pounding with every step. The trunk was still there, just as she had left it, but now it felt like a Pandora's box, waiting to unleash its secrets. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling as she sifted through its contents. The photograph, the letters, the journal, they were all there, but now they felt heavier, more significant. She unfolded the piece of paper Liam had given her, her breath catching as she read the words scrawled across it. "The truth is in the attic. Find it, protect it, and remember, no secrets." The wind outside seemed to grow louder, its whispers more insistent. Emma's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of the past. The attic, the promise, the weight of Liam's words, it all pointed to something bigger, something hidden. She began to search the attic more thoroughly, her fingers brushing against the dusty floorboards until she felt a slight unevenness. Kneeling down, she pried up the loose board, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside was a bundle of old documents tied together with a frayed ribbon. Her hands shook as she untied it, the papers spilling out onto the floor. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, and a single, faded photograph of their grandmother with a man who wasn't their grandfather. As she sifted through the documents, the truth began to unravel. Their grandmother had been married before, to a man who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The marriage had been kept secret, buried beneath layers of lies and half-truths. And Liam, it seemed, had stumbled upon the truth, a truth that had cost him everything. Emma's heart ached as she realized the weight of the burden Liam had carried. He had tried to protect her, to shield her from the darkness that had consumed him. But now, it was her turn to carry the torch, to uncover the secrets that had been hidden for so long. She gathered the documents, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. The wind outside seemed to calm, its whispers now a gentle hum, as if urging her forward. She stepped out of the attic, the weight of the truth heavy in her hands. The house felt different now, as if it too had been waiting for this moment. Emma knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she couldn't turn back. For Liam, for their promise, she would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And as the wind carried her forward, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was finally honoring the bond they had shared so many years ago. The wind outside seemed to guide her as Emma stepped out of the attic, clutching the bundle of documents tightly. The house felt alive, its creaks and groans echoing like whispers from the past. She made her way to the old oak tree, the place where she and Liam had spent so many summer days dreaming and scheming. The tree stood tall and unwavering, its branches swaying gently in the breeze as if welcoming her back. She sat beneath it, the papers spread out before her, and began to piece together the story they told. The documents revealed a tangled web of secrets, each one more startling than the last. Her grandmother, Eleanor, had been married to a man named Thomas before she met Emma's grandfather. Thomas had been a kind man, beloved by the community, but his sudden disappearance had left a void that no one dared to speak of. The official story was that he had left town, abandoning Eleanor and their young son. But the letters and photographs told a different tale, one of betrayal, deceit, and a love that had been torn apart by forces beyond their control. Emma's hands trembled as she read through the letters, each word painting a picture of a woman who had been forced to bury her past to protect her future. Eleanor had remarried quickly, her new husband offering stability and a fresh start. But the shadow of Thomas's disappearance had lingered, a silent specter that haunted the family for generations. Liam, it seemed, had uncovered the truth, a truth that had cost him his peace, and perhaps his life. As Emma delved deeper, she found a letter addressed to her, written in Liam's familiar handwriting. "Emma," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I've failed. I tried to protect you, to keep you safe from the darkness that's been following our family for years. But I couldn't do it alone. The truth is too big, too heavy. I need you to finish what I started. Find Thomas. Find out what really happened to him. And whatever you do, don't let them silence you." The words sent a chill down her spine. Who were they? And what had Liam discovered that had put him in danger? Emma's mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above her, and carrying with it the faintest whisper of Liam's voice. "Keep going," it seemed to say. "Don't stop now." She gathered the documents and returned to the house, her determination stronger than ever. The attic had yielded its secrets, but she knew there was more to uncover. She began to search the rest of the house, her eyes scanning every corner for clues. In the study, she found a hidden compartment in the desk, filled with more letters and a small, intricately carved box. Inside the box was a key, old and tarnished, with the initials TH engraved on the side. The key felt heavy in her hand, as if it carried the weight of the past. Emma's heart pounded as she tried to figure out what it unlocked. She searched the house from top to bottom, her frustration growing with each passing moment. Finally, in the cellar, she found a locked door she had never noticed before. The key fit perfectly, the lock clicking open with a satisfying thud. The room beyond was small and damp, its walls lined with shelves filled with jars and boxes. But what caught Emma's attention was the trunk in the corner, identical to the one in the attic. She opened it carefully, her breath catching as she saw what was inside. More documents, a stack of old newspapers, and a leather-bound journal with Thomas's initials on the cover. The journal was filled with entries detailing Thomas's life, his love for Eleanor, and his growing fear of a shadowy figure who had been following him. The final entry was dated the day before his disappearance. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," he had written. "They're watching me, waiting for me to slip. If anything happens to me, know that I loved Eleanor with all my heart, and I would have done anything to protect her." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she read the words, the pain and fear in Thomas's voice palpable even after all these years. She flipped through the newspapers, her heart sinking as she saw the headlines. "Local man missing. Mystery surrounds disappearance. No leads in Thomas Harding case." The articles painted a picture of a community in shock, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that someone had known more than they let on. As she sat in the dim light of the cellar, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Thomas had been a threat to someone powerful enough to make him disappear without a trace. And Liam, in his quest to uncover the truth, had become a threat as well. Emma's hands clenched into fists, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't let their sacrifices be in vain. She would find out who was behind this, no matter what it took. The wind outside seemed to grow louder, its whispers now a roar. Emma stood, the journal clutched tightly in her hand. She knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but she also knew she couldn't turn back. For Liam, for Thomas, for the family she had lost, she would uncover the truth. And as she stepped out of the cellar, the wind carried her forward, a silent guide on the path she had chosen. The wind howled as Emma stepped out of the cellar, the journal clutched tightly in her hands. The weight of the truth pressed down on her, but she felt a strange sense of clarity. She knew what she had to do. The answers lay somewhere in the town, hidden in the memories of those who had been there when Thomas disappeared. She just had to find the right person to ask. The first place she went was the local library, a small, weathered building that had stood in the town square for decades. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a knowing smile, greeted her warmly. "You're Eleanor's granddaughter, aren't you?" she asked, her voice tinged with nostalgia. Emma nodded, surprised that the woman recognized her. "I remember you and your cousin," the librarian continued. "You used to come here every summer, always with your noses buried in books." Emma smiled faintly, the memory bittersweet. "I'm trying to find out more about my family's history," she said carefully. "Specifically about Thomas Harding." The librarian's expression shifted, her smile fading into something more somber. "Thomas," she murmured, almost to herself. "That's a name I haven't heard in a long time." She led Emma to a secluded corner of the library, where old newspapers and records were stored. "Start here," she said, her voice low. "But be careful, dear. Some secrets are best left buried." Emma spent hours poring over the records, her eyes scanning every line for clues. She found mentions of Thomas in old town meeting minutes, his name appearing alongside discussions of land disputes and business deals. It seemed he had been a well-respected man, but there were hints of tension, of conflicts that had never been resolved. One name kept appearing alongside his, a man named Victor Grayson, a wealthy landowner who had been Thomas's business partner. The more Emma read, the more she began to suspect that Victor had played a role in Thomas's disappearance. She found a newspaper article from the time, detailing a heated argument between the two men at a town meeting. Witnesses had described Victor as furious, his face red with rage as he stormed out of the building. Thomas had been calm, but there had been a steely determination in his eyes that had left an impression on those who saw him. Emma's heart raced as she pieced together the timeline. The argument had taken place just days before Thomas vanished. She needed to find Victor, to confront him and demand answers. But when she asked the librarian about him, the woman's face paled. "Victor Grayson died years ago," she said quietly. "But his son, Richard, still lives in the family estate on the edge of town. If you're looking for answers, he might be the one to ask." The Grayson estate loomed large and imposing at the end of a long, tree-lined driveway. Emma's stomach churned as she approached the front door, her knuckles rapping against the heavy wood. The man who answered was tall and stern, his eyes cold as they settled on her. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone clipped. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself. "My name is Emma Harding," she said. "I'm looking for answers about my family, specifically about Thomas Harding and his connection to Victor Grayson." Richard's expression darkened, but he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "You'd better come in," he said, his voice low. The interior of the house was as cold and unwelcoming as its owner. Richard led her to a study, where a fire crackled in the hearth. He poured himself a drink, offering her nothing, before sitting down across from her. "What do you want to know?" he asked, his tone guarded. Emma met his gaze, her voice steady. "I want to know what happened to Thomas Harding. And I want to know why your father was so determined to silence him." Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny the accusation. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "My father was a proud man," he said slowly. "He didn't take kindly to those who crossed him. Thomas was a good man, but he made the mistake of standing up to Victor. And in this town, that was a dangerous thing to do." Emma's heart pounded as she listened, her hands clenched into fists. "Did your father have something to do with Thomas's disappearance?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger. Richard hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know for sure," he admitted. "But I do know that my father was capable of terrible things. And if Thomas was a threat to him, he wouldn't have hesitated to remove him." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emma felt a surge of rage, but she forced herself to stay calm. "And what about Liam?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did your father have something to do with his disappearance too?" Richard's expression softened, a flicker of regret crossing his face. "Liam was a good kid," he said quietly. "But he was digging into things he shouldn't have. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. I don't know what happened to him, but I do know that my father's legacy casts a long shadow." Emma stood, her legs trembling beneath her. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, her voice cold. "But I won't let this rest. Not until I find out the truth." Richard nodded, his expression unreadable. "Be careful, Emma," he said as she turned to leave. "Some secrets are better left buried." The wind outside was fierce, whipping through the trees as Emma made her way back to the house. Her mind raced with everything she had learned, the pieces of the puzzle finally coming together. She knew now that Thomas had been a victim of Victor's greed and pride, and that Liam had paid the price for trying to uncover the truth. But she also knew that she couldn't let their sacrifices be in vain. As she stepped inside the house, the wind seemed to calm, its whispers now a gentle hum. Emma made her way to the attic, the journal still clutched in her hands. She sat down, her back against the trunk, and began to write. She would document everything she had learned, every detail of the story that had been hidden for so long. And when she was done, she would share it with the world, no matter the consequences. For Liam, for Thomas, for the family she had lost, she would uncover the truth. And as the wind carried her forward, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was finally honoring the bond they had shared so many years ago. The whispers in the wind were no longer faint. They were clear, urgent, and filled with the voices of those she had loved and lost. And as she listened, she knew that she was no longer alone. The attic was silent now, the wind outside having stilled to a gentle breeze. Emma sat on the floor, the journal open in her lap, her pen moving steadily across the page. She wrote everything, every detail, every name, every piece of the puzzle she had uncovered. The story of Thomas Harding, a man who had loved deeply and paid the ultimate price. The story of Liam, her brave cousin, who had tried to right a wrong that had haunted their family for generations. And the story of herself, the one who had finally brought the truth to light. When she finished, she closed the journal, her hands trembling slightly. It felt heavier now, as if it carried not just the weight of the past, but the hope of the future. She knew what she had to do next. The truth couldn't stay hidden any longer. It was time to share it with the world. Emma made her way to the town square, the journal tucked securely under her arm. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the cobblestone streets. She stopped in front of the old bulletin board outside the town hall, where notices and announcements were posted. With a deep breath, she pinned a copy of her findings to the board, along with a simple note. For Liam. For Thomas. For the truth. Word spread quickly. By the next morning, a small crowd had gathered around the bulletin board, their murmurs growing louder as they read the story. Emma watched from a distance, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw recognition in their eyes, shock, and even guilt. Some turned away, unable to meet her gaze, while others approached her, their voices filled with gratitude and relief. Among them was Richard Grayson. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of what she had done. Emma felt a flicker of respect for him, knowing how difficult it must have been to face the truth about his father. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The town had a long way to go to heal from the wounds of the past. As the days passed, the story gained momentum. Newspapers picked it up, and soon it was being discussed far beyond the borders of the small town. Emma received letters from people who had known Thomas, sharing their memories and offering their support. She even heard from distant relatives she had never met, all of them grateful for the truth she had uncovered. But the most meaningful moment came one evening as she sat on the porch of her grandmother's house, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faintest whisper of Liam's voice. "You did it," it seemed to say. "You kept your promise." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. She had done what she set out to do. The truth was out, and no one could take that away. The weight that had been pressing down on her for so long was finally lifted, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. The house felt different now, as if it too had been waiting for this moment. The creaks and groans that had once felt ominous now seemed comforting, like the whispers of loved ones long gone. Emma knew she would never forget the summer she had spent with Liam, the bond they had shared, or the promise they had made. But she also knew that it was time to move forward, to honor their memory by living a life filled with courage and truth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Emma stood and walked to the old oak tree. She placed a hand on its rough bark, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carried away by the wind. "For everything." The wind responded with a gentle rustle, its whispers now a soothing melody. Emma closed her eyes, letting the moment wash over her. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew that she was ready. For Liam, for Thomas, for herself, she would face whatever came next with the same determination and strength that had brought her this far. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emma turned and walked back to the house, her heart light and her spirit unburdened. The whispers in the wind were no longer faint or haunting. They were clear, steady, and filled with love. And as she stepped inside, she knew that she was finally home.